Mayor, would you bring us up to date on what's going on in the city regarding the state of emergency and what you think particularly downtown residents might want to know?
Right. Okay. Yeah, sure. It's an awful lot going on. This is obviously something that we've never encountered before. And, like I said in the meeting on March 16th, which was our last meeting as a group of commissioners, these things are changing. Challenges that we never thought we would ever have are happening, sometimes on a minute by minute basis. It's, it's very hard to anticipate each new challenge, but we do have them. The days are from morning to night. It's all things COVID. And I have to say, it's been quite challenging, not only from my perspective. In a situation like this, you obviously want to rally as a group and say, commissioners, how are we going to embrace this challenge? What are we going to do to meet it? But we have to also be wary of all of the sunshine laws and rules. And so you would want to turn to your group and say, what are your thoughts? And we have to do that with sunshine. So we're very limited. We're going to have a city commission meeting on Monday. As to Eileen and Patrick and former Vice Mayor Sheelan, you would know that this is my Monday's packet. It looks very pretty, doesn't it?
I can see you're keeping Post-it notes in business.
Yeah. So, that sort of stuff still has to go on. And in there is an agenda item of COVID discussion. So we will have that opportunity. At the last meeting, the discussion was only COVID. So we were allowed for the first time at our last meeting to actually meet and have a discussion. And I was able to, sort of have that feeling of the commission as a unit talking about this issue. But city staff has been incredible. The city manager, Marlon, all of the staff, they've been, we're functioning at about 80%. People are at home like that. It happened, very, very quickly that people are working virtually. And if they are not working virtually, they've been shifted to another department that isn't like, the utilities and the parks and so on and so forth. So it's been really a Herculean effort. And I have to give kudos to everyone who has just completely complied. And I'm just so proud of everyone for working together towards this and staying focused that, this is a pandemic and we are all in this together. And, this is what we're having to do in this state of emergency. And so, we're doing the best we can. We are required to coordinate with the county on all of these efforts that are emergency based. So I do get an awful lot of emails from people saying, especially from the beginning, why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you issue shelter in place? Why don't you close restaurants completely? Why don't you do this? And so on and so forth. And we as a city were the first in the state, if not one of the first, to issue the declaration of public health emergency. And that was on March 13th. And I know it was a very, very painful thing for us to do. But I do think that that was the Friday before St. Patrick's Day, before huge events at, the Van Wezel and Downtown Farmers Market. And I'm sorry for all of those things that had to cancel, but they did. And I think that saved a lot of lives and a lot of spreading of this virus by us acting so quickly. And we didn't mandate it. We strongly recommended it. And immediately, all the organizations complied, except for the one evening of the St. Patrick's Day celebration, and that was only Friday evening. Other than that, people and groups and organizations were actually, in essence, begging us to issue this statement, to ask them to comply. And people wanted to, and even with the restaurants, even with everything else, I felt that we as a city have had such incredible compliance. I'm just in awe of that. And a small percentage, we are having problems with a small percentage of the community, but by and large, I think we are having an incredible degree of compliance. So for that, I'm very, very thankful. And we are working, constant conference meetings, what to do about X, Y, Z. And again, things that we didn't even know we'd have to deal with, we're dealing with. And you're becoming or, we are becoming experts in fields that, we didn't even know existed. So, but that's all part of the job. And working with the county and working with the emergency operations and all of the state organizations. And I have a direct contact at the governor's office, which, I never thought I would necessarily need, except for, on the occasional thing. It's sometimes a daily phone call. My lines of communication are clear with the county. I can call them with the other cities, with Venice, with Northport, with Tampa, with other cities and other states. I've been in touch with Mayor Garcetti's office from Los Angeles, from Detroit to Chicago to New York City, to Atlanta. I've been on phone calls with mayors from all over the country. I've been in touch with people all over the world, actually Germany, France, Italy, Argentina, and experts in the field. So, the amount of outreach and communication, I'm so thankful. And I know you've all read these articles about, what if this would have happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago before we had the internet and the lines of communication that we have now. And I can't even imagine, but to have these lines of communication open and clear are really, really valuable for us to take measured steps and quick steps and strong steps. And all along the way, I have to say how incredibly proud I am of our city staff for, it's all day and all night. It doesn't stop. It's 24/7. I know Tom, Marlin, John Legge, myself, I can only speak for myself as a commissioner, a month, every day, all day, morning to midnight, or even 2 a.m., Sunday, Saturday, doesn't matter. My husband's birthday, it doesn't matter. It's been all day, all the time, COVID all the time. And so Mayor, I just want you to know we're working really, really hard.
Mayor, can I just ask, what are the restrictions or the recommendations that are in effect now for the city in particular?
Well, of course, we have the statewide shelter in place, and that's really, really important that we all heed that. I see everybody is at home. I'm happy about that. And, we know the CDC guidelines. I would say personally, from the research I've done from other countries, they have gone steps further than we have gone. And we, as a city, are not going to supersede. We don't really have the authority to go further than the county or the state. But personally, I would recommend taking it a step further, just because I've seen other countries doing it. As far as like the groups, right now it's 10 or more. I would just be around the people you're with at home, and I wouldn't be around anyone else personally, unless it's urgent family members. Now is not the time to be inviting people over to your house and having dinners, even if it's 2 or 3 other people. Personally, I wouldn't do it, and I wouldn't recommend it. But the guidelines are 10 or more is not allowed. 6 feet are the guidelines. Personally, I would have more space than that. I would always wear a mask when you're outside in the rights of way of public. I mean, unless it's wide open space and there's absolutely nobody there to park and you're doing it for exercise and you can't breathe well. But if you're going from your car to the grocery store, I would have your mask on. That's what I would be doing. If you're going to pick up food, I would have your mask on. I would adhere to the, only essential businesses, services in your home or otherwise. So I personally take it a step further, but the CDC guidelines, everybody knows.
I'm sorry, but what are the very basic guidelines? I agree with you. It's, better safe than sorry, but what are the guidelines that are in place right now that people must adhere to?
Right. No more than 10 people in a group.
Okay.
Okay. 6 feet apart when you're out in public.
Okay.
Right. And then the advice is to wear masks.
So it's advisory. The mask is advisory. Okay.
It's advisory at this point. Yeah. Although I think New York City is going to make it mandatory. I don't know if we're going to do that, but it is, it's advised to wear masks. And even if they're homemade and they filter out 10%, 10% is better than no percent.
I would agree with you. But it's just good to know what the actual guidelines are, because then if you want to increase the guidelines, then I guess you take it to the governor's office. Is that
right?
Go?
Right, exactly. And we can either go to the county or the governor's office, and it's my impression that the county does not want, the county's attorney So it's was in the beginning a little bit of this finger pointing situation, whereas we as a city kind of we're talking about, issuing our state of emergency and making it mandatory, but we were told we couldn't do it because we couldn't supersede the county. The county's attorneys told them they couldn't supersede the governor. And then the governor's office said, no, you guys can do whatever you want. So really, it's like, you can blame it on the attorneys, Eileen.
Oh, don't do that. You can never have too many attorneys.
Oh, yeah, you can. But we were not getting clear direction. And I was actually in communication with the governor's office pretty much on a daily basis, trying to get clarification from the attorney general in writing, from the governor saying, yes, the city of Sarasota, you have the authority to do X, Y, and Z. And while we were trying to get that writing in place, the governor came out and issued what he issued as shelter at home statewide. So at this point, the attorneys are not willing to say that it's okay for the cities and the county to go above and beyond. Plus, the city's ability to do anything, really, we must, in an emergency situation, go through the county. The county has the health department. They have the services, they have the staff, they have the funding. All the funding funnels through the county. So we really should, to make any efforts in this situation, go through the county for them to really be effective. Now, we are doing things on our own for the homeless. And I know that's a question that we were going to talk about, the homeless situation. Yes. The city is going to be doing, we've ordered some porta potties to be put out in 3 locations. I said 2, but I meant 3 locations in the city. And they are going to be ADA compliant and also have some sanitary station portion to it, but I don't think showers yet. We were working with the county trying to get them to create a more robust response to the homeless situation as far as feeding them and sanitary stations, showers, bathrooms, because a lot of the regular social services have been curbed or closed, and the hours are limited. Like the Salvation Army, their bathrooms are open, which are also showers, for 2 hours from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., which is not a lot of time if you need those facilities. So we were trying to work with the county to get this. They're working on a plan and it's not quite in place, but each day we see in the city that the homeless people are actually in our city. The county's much larger. They have other things they've got to focus on, so it's not a #1 priority for them, where it is a #1 priority for us because it's in our city. So we are trying to work through the proper channels, and it is more efficient to work through them.
Okay, I'm going to just open it up to the other members here on the screen. Is there someone who would like to ask a question? If you could raise your hand or raise a piece of white paper, or no one has any questions? Oh, Patrick, please.
Yeah, Mayor, you mentioned that the city commission meeting is now going to be scheduled for next Monday, the 20th, correct?
Correct.
And there was a description, I didn't get into the details of that yet, for public input. So if there are items on the agenda, what could you describe to us how we should communicate that to our residents or any of our managers? They have particular topics that they want to comment on, or?
Certainly, yes. There's a form online that you can fill out. You can fill out online if you want to have public comment. You actually have to write down your public comment, and Ms. Griggs will read it into the record at the meeting. So we are not going to have people actually speaking, but they're going to be submitting their 3-minute comments either online or in writing or in email, or no, and that's it. We decided that it was not practical to be able to do the in-person comments and be able to still comply with the CDC guidelines. And so this is going to be a conference call meeting, and it's going to be Ms. Griggs, myself, and Mr. Brown. We are only 3 people who can sit safely 6 feet apart at the table, and then Mr. Larson is going to be in the back, and then everybody else will call in like at the last meeting. And then at the very next meeting, we are going to have, we have our own software. It's like Zoom, but it's a little bit more secure. And we're going to be doing our first city commission meeting via Zoom, and nobody will be in the city commission chambers, and that will be on the 4th of May. So you can still and should submit your comments. And there are items that are, we have about 10 consent 1, we have about 5 consent 2s. We have 2 new business, 2 unfinished business, I believe, and then minutes, and that's it. But some items on the consent may get pulled, I intend on pulling 3 actually. And so there will be further discussion on those, and comments will have to be submitted.
Other questions? Patrick, did you have any follow-up to that?
No, it'll be something we can discuss internally as to how we want to educate our members as to how to do that or organize that should they have a particular issue or something. We're still trying to get a couple more people. They're trying to join in here and see if we can't, we'll discuss that further afterwards, but thank you for that.
Okay, I saw Peter and then Ken.
Mayor, obviously, you know, I'm very concerned about what's happening to people without shelters. And I was wondering if it might be helpful, and you may be considering doing this with the staff, and it may already be underway or even completed and I don't know it. I think it would be helpful if we had a plan, a written plan from the city as to what you might expect or what you would like to see done to assist the people with without homes. I know that we're moving towards having the sanitary stations, restrooms. We still have people feeding the persons without homes, and that may or may not be good. I'm not sure that all of the compliance with masks and 6 feet away, et cetera. But if we had a written plan as to what we would like to see happening to the happening with the persons who are in shelter. For instance, Monday, I go for a 1 hour walk when it's least populated, which seems to be around 4 in the afternoon. I don't know why. I can walk almost down the middle of Main Street. I usually go, because where I live now, I walk by the bus station at 2nd Street. I walk by 1st Street. I go up Main. I go through Pineapple Park, Paul Thorpe Park. I go down by the Bayfront, come back around through 5 Points Park. It's a nice 3-mile loop. So on Monday, there was only 4 people without homes on the streets at 4 o'clock, none. I asked 2 police, in fact, there were 6 officers and 5 patrol cars. So the patrol cars outnumbered the people who were without homes at that point in time. I asked 2 of the officers who they have no idea where these people went, but they said kind of with tongue in cheek, almost laughing. I asked a security guard on Tuesday because there were very few. I suspect they've been, I suspect they've scattered on their own. I'm not sure the city has done anything. But the point is, I'd like to suggest that maybe a written plan with some documentation, because I hear that's what the county would like to see too. They would like to see what the city can do so that, and then a plan as to what you would like the written plan as to what you would like the county to do so that we could get behind those plans and help coordinate the services.
Absolutely. I actually just had a discussion with the city attorney and with the city manager earlier just about that exact same thing. And so I think that is going to be something that's going to be put together by the city manager, and he may even bring that up on Monday at the city commission meeting, because he may want that to be a vote, because it could lead to some policy decisions, and he may want the commission's support on that. So it's my thought that that's probably what he's going to do on Monday. But I'm not, we don't have any documentation on that part yet, but if it's going to require resources and a policy decision, he may just ask us to do that.
Thank you.
I
Ken,
agree with you, yes.
I'm sorry, Ken, I think you had a question.
Yes, I had a question about testing and whether there are any sites in the city where people can be tested for coronavirus, and whether there's going to be any expansion beyond the limited groups of people that have been identified for testing so far, like old farts like us.
So I think you broke up there just a little bit on your question, but I think
my video and my audio locks up periodically.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think if I understand your question correctly, you were asking if there's going to be any testing in the city of Sarasota, and if there's going to be also any testing very specifically aimed at older folks.
Right.
Okay. And yes to both those questions. Actually, tomorrow There's going to be a pop-up test in North Sarasota. That is something that myself and some other people have been advocating heavily for, because as we all know and have read, that this affects the African American community harder than a lot of other communities. So they were doing testing out at Twin Lakes. They did about 1,000 tests out there. Those are by appointment only, reference from your physician. Those are people who were either vulnerable, so the age requirement, and or having symptoms of COVID. The pop-up test in Newtown tomorrow will be also reference only by screening through the health department. So you actually have to call in the health department, and you either have to be over 65 and or have symptoms, and you call in, they screen, and then they're making appointments for people, and they're only telling the people that they make appointments for where this pop-up test is going to be, because it's aimed at people not only drive through, but also walk up. So that's going to be sort of a test facility in North Sarasota tomorrow. They're aiming at between 20 and 30 people, testing 20 to 30 people. And then depending upon the success and the demand of that, they're going to gauge whether they do more pop-up tests throughout the city. But one requirement is age. And so it's 65 and older, I believe you're already in. Which, P.S., by the way, I don't call old folks, but.
Well, we could put all of us in, couldn't we? Anybody have another question?
Yeah, Eileen, this is Bob Easterly.
Please.
Mayor, Jen?
Yes, sir.
I've got a question for you. With the anticipation of reduction in revenues that the city's probably going to experience over time, what plans are in place for the city to meet critical community services and financial obligations? Financial obligations, a lot of it to bondholders, general obligation bonds, et cetera.
Yeah. So that topic was brought up at our last city commission meeting. We're doing budget. We're doing the CAFR stuff on Monday as well. And that is a big topic that's going to be impacting us, and we're going to be discussing. Commissioner or Vice Mayor Freeland Eddy brought that up very specifically as related to the parking garage at St. Armand's, because that bond is tied to the meters, and the meters are not bringing in any money. And what does that going to look like? And the attorney has said there are no provisions for this kind of a situation, this sort of act of God kind of, pandemic, and it will probably come out of our general funds. So, this and many other issues are completely new for us. Nobody could have imagined that this was ever going to happen. And not only the legal department, but the financial department, they're all scrambling to try to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to handle this, and, make suggestions as far as our budget. And as you know, summer is our budget season. That's when we start. So, we're going to have to make some very tough decisions, and we're just at the very start of it, and no plan is in place as of yet. That discussion will begin on Monday.
Okay.
Other questions? Mayor, I have a question. You are able to hold the city commission meetings out of via the internet. How about the planning board or other crucial advisory boards?
No, the governor's relief of the restriction of a quorum being physically present does not apply to any other boards. It applies to special districts like SwiftMud, and it applies to the local government agency like the city commission, but it does not apply to city created advisory boards, not yet. It's one of those requests that is in to the governor, and we're still waiting on also clarity on the shot clock, which some of you may or may not know about. The legislature last year issued a shot clock of 6 months on development applications. So once a developer submits an application, the city has 6 months to process it, or it's deemed approved. And so we have two items here, and we're still unclear on if the shot clock has been relieved or not, that are contingent on the shot clock. Patrick, I believe you had two of those at your planning board meeting. One was the lights at the baseball stadium, and the other one is Brewster's, I believe. Both of those are shot clock items.
You mean where they're extended over, the time period to begin construction has been extended due to the emergencies?
Right. 6 months, and we're still unclear as to whether or not the governor has absolutely relieved that shot clock requirement or not. The lights expired on April 10th. So either it's approved, in which case I don't know why it's coming to us, or we do have to hear it on Monday. So, you know, I had a conversation with the attorney this morning, and we're still unclear on all of this stuff. There's so many things that you don't even think about in these kinds of situations that you can't even anticipate, that you have a question about, and you say, well, how does this even apply to this situation? And we're you know, confronted with those really like on an hourly basis, like I said, and even sometimes minutely. It just happens, and we're unsure. So
well, I think a lot of people are concerned about the planning board. Of course, you know, it's a concern of mine, but because it holds things up,
yes,
if things aren't being approved. But the planning board is actually mandated by the state, so I don't really understand why the state didn't include them in their mandate. I'm sorry.
that's a good point, Eileen. That's a very good point, and I can bring that up with the attorney and just remind him that it is a local planning agency, so maybe it would be considered. You know, all of this is new to all of us.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Someone was holding their hand up there a minute ago. Peter.
Yeah, I don't want to take up time if other people have questions, because I've had a question. But Mayor, I'd like to know from your point of view, the DSCA, you know, represents 38, 39. It keeps changing. Patrick's doing such a good job, and now Eileen, we keep adding membership. They're banging to get in, and we can't process their checks fast enough, I guess. But at any rate, we have, and that represents about 4,000 residents downtown. With a huge tax base. What, from your point of view, do you see that the DSCA being able to do to help the city, not just with the COVID, but maybe with the revenue production and so forth, or communication?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there are so many things that you all can do as just as human beings or as a group. You know, you can encourage people to order from the local restaurants that are doing the delivery and the takeout, and those are so easy. You know, I know like a lot of the restaurants like C'est La Vie and some of the others are doing curbside to go. So Mark Lyons worked with some of the restaurants downtown and created some sort of curbside to go spaces so that you can order and pay online. You pull up, you pop your trunk, they put your food in there. There's no face-to-face. So any kind of frequenting of those kinds of, you know, businesses and supporting them, I know they would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Because I know a lot of them are just hanging on by, you know, their fingernails at this point, a lot of the restaurants and the businesses downtown. So anything you can do about that. Our nonprofits are also hanging on by their fingernails. I'm sure you have all heard about the Giving Challenge, which is still happening. That's going to be the 28th and the 29th of April. These are all our arts organizations and cultural, humanitarian, and philanthropic organizations. They all need support. They all need help. You know, they're all having online auctions, they're having events, they're doing donations, the donations are matched. You can help tremendously with all of those. Meals on Wheels can always use donation of funds and also people for drivers. All Face Food Bank can use donations and funds. They're doing a tremendous effort to help feed people who can't get out and can't, you know, get meals. So we have just so many arts, philanthropic, humanitarian organizations and our businesses. Anything you all can do to help out and to continue to frequent them. I have a friend who wants to support a local business. And so what she's doing is, because she can't consume nearly the amount of food that she wants to donate to them, she called the restaurant and said, I would like to buy dinner for this person, this person, this person, this person, and this person. And gave the restaurant their number, who contacted them. I happened to be a recipient. And so I receive a free dinner one night whenever I want. And so that's her way of supporting this one restaurant. So these are all ideas of things that we can do. And if you have the means, I highly encourage you to continue to support all of these kinds of organizations if you can. It would be greatly appreciated.
Mayor, is there any fund set up for assisting, for instance, restaurant workers or anything like that?
So I think there are some organizations. So I know there, I can't remember off the top of my head the name of them, but there are organizations through the Chamber, the Chamber of Commerce and the EDC. They both have links to funds where you can support the people that have been laid off and you know, need help. So yes, and there are a couple Facebook groups as well. and I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of them off the top of my head, but if you go to the Chamber's website and the EDC's website, they both are an incredible source of information for helping these businesses.
Other questions? Mayor, I have a question based on research that David Lowe did. David, please jump in here. Regarding the areas of the city that seem to be hit more than others. One of them is, if not the highest, David, is that the highest? Is the downtown area?
It's the highest on a per capita basis.
On a per capita.
It's, I believe, 19 confirmed cases as of yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, those heat maps, that's what you're looking at, are the heat maps, right?
And I've also drilled into the weeds. I don't know, Eileen, did you share with the mayor my spreadsheet?
I did not. I sent it to everybody else, but I did not send it to her.
Okay, and just full disclosure, I've been sending it to Tom Barwin and Marlon and Jan Thornburg, so they've been getting it since I began, and Mayor, I'd be happy to send it to you, but basically what it does is take as a source data. I think it's about 14 days the county has been a heat map, and they've been reporting confirmed cases on a zip code basis. So I took those and put them in a spreadsheet and then developed charts based on, one chart is in absolute numbers, how many in a zip code. And then I tried to find some estimates of the population in that zip code, and then did it on a per capita basis, just to kind of get, and it gives two pictures. For example, Longboat on a per capita basis is very, very high. Even though they have 12 confirmed cases, but they're a third or a half of the population of 24236, right? And so this was just a way that I thought of it. Tom seems to have found it helpful, putting it in a graphic sense. Full disclosure, I'm a rookie at this, and some of this, the reliability of the county information is, I don't know how many tests are being done. I don't know, but and I don't track deaths, but it's a shot, and I don't know, those of you who have looked at it, people like Patrick and Roger are probably better around numbers than I am, but it was my attempt to try and take one person's look at it.
So that heat map is actually, that was a request from Tom Barwin. So he was the one that was asking for the heat map, if we could see by zip code where, the confirmed cases were. And yeah, we get those pretty much every day, and they've been really valuable / frightening. And I don't know if you've been on any of the websites like the COVID-19 state website, and you look at those numbers where you look at the percentage of the people that have been tested, and then the percentage of the people that have been positive, and the percentage of the people that have been hospitalized, and the percentage of the people that have died. It's quite shocking when you realize it's 0.4% of our population that has actually been tested. Not even 1%. So it is, I know there's a lot of talk about, opening up and so on and so forth, but I'm going to say to everyone, please put the brakes on until we have, more numbers, more tests, more information. I would hate to see us have been so careful up to this point and then have a huge resurgent come back, because it's very frightening. But anything you want to send me, I will gladly take. I love charts and maps and numbers and grids, and I love all that stuff. So I'm welcome.
It'll be on its way in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Mayor, question, and this ties in with David's research. Do we have any kind of estimate, or maybe just a guesstimate, as to how many people actually are in the city? The population figures, I assume, are full-time residents. I don't think they count the part-time residents who live, 6 months plus a day somewhere else. How many of, I'm just curious as to how many of them have stayed, and which would swell the population. And my guess, an awful lot of them have stayed.
Right, and that was one of Tom Barwin's, that was one of Mr. Barwin's questions, was that you know, it is 6 months and a day. They're not counted as a city resident, but they have probably stayed, and a large portion of them have probably stayed. So that's why some of the numbers are skewed. We don't have an idea, but yes, that is correct. That is a question that is raised, for sure.
Be interesting to get that
Yeah.
from Sarasota.
David here. I've
Go
been
ahead.
doing some population estimates related to park needs and stuff like that. And David Smith at the city seems to be the most knowledgeable. He estimated that the last official data was the city was around 45,000, but he feels the new census, when that's completed, that the city number is going to be 50,000, 51,000 on a census basis. Now, what seasonally adjustment is a factor there if it's 20% or 25% more. But I think his number today on legal residents or whatever is right around 50,000.
I'm sorry, who did you say he was?
David Smith.
Oh, David Smith. Okay.
The planning department.
Yeah.
Got it.
Mayor, how is the census going? I mean, this hit right in the middle of pandemic.
Yes, that is Vice Mayor Freeland Eddy's responsibility. She stepped up. So thankful that she did. She's been doing a tremendous job getting the message out there. I think it's going okay, and they're doing the best that they can under the circumstances, but it's definitely a challenge, and it's one of the most important things we need to be doing as citizens is filling it out. Has everyone here filled out the census?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
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 We're getting
Yes.
all yeses.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, so
Well, I
do
guess
too.
that's something else we can send out if we send out communication, is to say, please fill out the census.
And please ask people that you know to fill out the census and remind them to fill it out and remind them how important it is. It is one, but I would encourage you, we're going to be discussing that on Monday. We're actually having a presentation. She's going to be doing a presentation of National Census Day on Monday at the City Commission meeting. But just get in direct contact with her and get an update. I mean, I think that she would be the best one to give you, you know, the temperature on how that is going.
Okay, thank you. Ken, I think you had a hand up. Ken?
Yeah, I'm on the census. We have a meeting this afternoon, April 8th. We had a 41.9% response rate, which is a little bit low. And I think the National Census Bureau is going to extend the census time for responses. We are ramping up on the committee a renewed effort to get the word out. I worked with Meals on Wheels yesterday to provide information to recipients of Meals on Wheels to get them to respond at a higher rate, because it's in those areas where people who get Meals on Wheels, for example, are responding at a very low rate.
That's a good idea. We should all get the word out regarding the census. It matters. Are there any other questions for the mayor? I know she's got a lot to do every day, all day. David?
Yeah, just back to the homeless situation, this very sad situation.
Yes.
Mayor, you mentioned that 3 hygiene stations, you were aware of those. Some of us in the Rosemary, we read about it in the paper on Saturday, that one would be near Resurrection House and one near Salvation Army. And we were reading about that in the paper, and I've expressed to the city manager that that's probably not a good idea. And I believe he has indicated that the plans to put the porta potties near Resurrection House is being revisited. That was a concern to some business owners in that area. Again, I think the Rosemary District Association, we want to be compassionate about this. We want to understand that we may have some alternative ideas for the placement of those. And if you folks would involve us, we would like to be a positive rather than please don't have us read about it in the newspaper. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have to say it's been one of our biggest priorities is to try to help the homeless population. And just personally, you know, one of the problems is that for example, the CARES money that the county got, $508,000, I believe it was, to help with the homeless situation. One of the requirements is that it's very, of course, very specifically for COVID. And so it's in helping the homeless population that already has COVID. Well, there's another side to that story. And the other side of the story is that there are people that are homeless that want shelter and don't want to get the virus, right? And that money technically can't go to them. They don't have the virus yet, but they don't have shelter, and they want to stay away from the group, but they can't. So, you know, these are the kinds of issues that we're working through to try to help. And we as the city, we don't have the resources. The money doesn't flow to us. It goes to the county first and then to us. We don't have the facilities. We don't have the staff. We have 2 caseworkers, you know, that work. One is trying to keep people in their homes that are in homes, and the other one is Crystal. So she's our one person to deal with the whole situation. So that's why we are desperately trying to coordinate and communicate with the county and try to get them to be on board with some of the efforts that we want to do as far as feeding and sanitary stations go, and potentially some sort of hotel housing for them in the interim. But, you know, it is very, very complicated. And the location of the portalettes, I had heard it was a bus station, Salvation Army, and there was a third place, but it wasn't Resurrection House. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but I can get back with you. And I'll ask, I mean, obviously I'm going to talk to Tom today. I've got a meeting with him at 4.
Yeah,
so
Tom called me a couple hours ago. So
okay. He did say Resurrection House was the third place.
And then the other thing I would just add here is, I think the group on this call are really trying to help, and we really need some big ideas here. Either could it be Bobby Jones that is vacant now? Could it be the Coast Guard building at the Bay Park, which is now vacant for 6 weeks? Could it be the leasing of some semi-derelict motels up the trail? But I mean, I would encourage the collective we to be bold and decisive and, you know, just kind of really try and do what we can to kind of go with this. Tom was mentioning that Crystal's work has identified 35 particular homeless individuals that are particularly at risk due to age or underlying health conditions. Well, how could we help address those 35 and leasing a motel for a couple motels up the trail, for example, that are vacant now, and just somehow find the money and the supervision to do that. But
yeah, absolutely. And these are the discussions that we're having. And I had a really good conversation with County Commissioner Mike Moran, and I was talking to him about this. And, you know, so the county's experience was they had somebody who was diagnosed, and they were in the hospital, I think for 7 days. And then they were let out of the hospital. And so they tried to help this homeless person get into a motel to be continued to be quarantined for the time that they're supposed to be. And the person was not very compliant and didn't want to comply and had friends over and did, you know, illicit activities. And that did not work out well. And so that gave them a bad representation. And so when I spoke with Commissioner Moran, I said, how about you just start with the people that want to comply? The people that say, I want a roof over my head, I'll comply. I'll be good, I promise. And let's start with those. Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 20? Is it 2? It doesn't matter. Let's start with those. Those are going to be the easy cases. It's a little bit more complicated than that, because then, you know, at some point you say, well, then the city can just do that themselves. But then also it's a stronger, better effort when we work together with the county. And I think that's what we're trying to do, which goes back to Peter Fanning's comment earlier, that we have a plan, it's written, it's in place, it's thought out. And I think we were trying to react very quickly to the situation. That didn't work out. And so now I think we have to have a plan and have something in place that's, you know, that is with the county. But yes, we will definitely involve you, and thank you for your offer to help, and we accept. Thank you.
And Peter, you have a question?
Yes, well, I just a comment with regard to that, and that is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, granted, Sarasota is kind of a unique situation. It's unusual for a city of fewer than 50,000 people, or whatever it is, maybe it's 50,000 now, having such a problem with people who are unsheltered. Usually it's a much bigger city. But for instance, Tampa, Tampa is a city. They're not relying on Hillsborough County to come and bail them out. They put together a plan, and they've learned some things. And we should look at Tampa and say, what did you learn? One of the things that they learned is using old hotel rooms proved to be quite problematic because it ended up in congregate living with people not distancing, with people who had addiction problems and not compliant, smoking and shooting up in the stairwells, et cetera, et cetera. And so they took some actions that made that work. And I don't think that we have given it enough thought or enough communication with our sister cities, and they tend to be larger. I'm sorry about that. Boston, San Francisco, Miami, they all have huge populations, but there are still principles behind these kinds of accommodations that we need to make or are trying to make that we could learn from them and modify them to fit Sarasota's size.
Yeah, I agree with you a lot on what you have said. I think our very specific challenge is staffing, but we do have great organizations that are willing to work with us and help us with this population. We have a lot of volunteers, but there definitely are challenges, and it would be more efficient if we could go through the county and work with the county because they do have the staff, the resources, and the facilities. But if that's not a possibility, then we will have to figure out a plan and maybe not reinvent it and try to do something along the lines of what Tampa has done. And, if you have anything in writing and you want to send it to me, I would be happy to read it and take that into consideration. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions? If not, Mayor, it sounds like what you're saying, one of the best things we can do involves communication. And that's something we can certainly work on. And let me ask you this. This has been really very helpful. I wonder if we can impose on you to do it every once in a while, every week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sure. Absolutely. No problem at all.
Perhaps we can set that up, and we will probably bring in questions possibly from property managers and residents of buildings that may be a little bit less global and a little more local to condominium living, since that's what the members of this organization are. So if you don't mind, we'll try to work with you and
absolutely
see what your schedule is, and then try to disseminate whatever information we can. And we're going to talk about that after you. Oh, Patrick has something.
Well, just real quickly on that particular question, has the mayor or other city staff received inquiries from any downtown condos about advice for closing their own swimming pools or gyms or things like that they have control over on their private property? Has that come up?
So I believe that, Eileen told me that was going to be one of the questions, and I called the city attorney and I talked to him about that. And what he said about the pool openings, the gym openings, the visitors, the contractors, and so on and so forth, is that because it is private property, it is up to you all to manage that yourselves, but you still must comply with the CDC guidelines. And what some other places are doing, for example, if people in the condo want to go to the gym, is that they're having the manager schedule times. So, Patrick would go at 9 a.m. and so would Eileen, and then just the two of you would be in the gym, and then you would leave, and then it would be wiped down, and then the next two people would go in, for example. And you could do the same thing with any other community facilities that you have. But you must still comply with the CDC guidelines, of no more than a certain number of people and the distancing. And that your contractors should stick to the essential business items. So if it's plumbing, it's anything has to do with sanitary or safety, that is allowed. If you just want new wallpaper, no. And also, if you see something that you need to call and report, you see groups of somebody, having 15 people on their balcony, at sunset or something, and you need to report something that you see that someone is not complying. He gave me the number, which is the police's non-emergency number, which is 941-316-1199. And those incidences need to be called into the police's non-emergency number.
That was 316. What was the last part?
1199.
Okay, we'll be sure to publish that then.
And then I also wanted to make sure that I sent in, I was going to look, but I thought it would be too distracting at my email. the number for the pop-up on North Tamiami Trail, in case any of you want to spread that information to people who want to have a test and comply with the requirements. I can give you that number, and I would suggest calling, even if it's just for yourself.
And that's tomorrow.
I believe so. Yep.
Tomorrow, one day only, correct?
I think so. They're gonna do a test.
Ah, okay.
I thought there was just an announcement that came out. There was just that they were opening up and they said they wouldn't give you the location, but you could call the number and they would tell you where to go. But you're saying that's just for one day?
Well, they're going to test it tomorrow. They want to do more pop-ups because they realized that Twin Lakes was it was only for people who had cars. I mean, what if you don't have a car and you just need to walk? So that's why they decided to break that down and sort of pop up in different locations. And they're by appointment only because they don't want groups of people coming and so on and so forth. They want people to have an appointment at a time and comply with the guidelines. So they're going to do a test.
How is this being advertised? I mean, pop-up is
word of mouth, word of mouth. Well,
Yikes.
word of mouth, newsletters. They're going to do a PSA. They're going to, we had a meeting with the Amaryllis Neighborhood Association and Janie Poe. So I was online at that neighborhood like this for that neighborhood meeting. And they're going to get it out through, in North Sarasota through churches. Even though the churches are not open, they have still bulletins and they have a tremendous spread and be able to, get it out that way. So through the neighborhood associations, e-blasting, through those neighborhood groups.
Okay, David.
Yeah, I would just make one observation, Mayor. I believe you said toward the beginning of our session that their target was maybe to get 20 or 30 tests. My concern is if you've got 500 people trying to get tested and virtually everybody is denied for one reason or the other, it could create a concern, an unintended consequence. So I don't know what to do about that, but it could be, if the word, I know the Rosemary Association, we became aware of it and it went out to, in an email blast to about 400 people on our list.
Yep.
So that word with that number is out there now.
Yeah.
And heaven knows how many people are going to try and get it. I would personally like to get the test. I thought the criteria was you had to show symptoms, but I think you indicated that maybe if you're over 65, that's a symptom.
Well,
So,
yeah. Yeah, they were limiting it to over 65. Oh, Patrick Gannon is sharing something here.
That's good.
Yeah, this is the one I received just this morning from the county health.
Testing is for anyone who currently is experiencing fever, cough, or shortness of breath, or who works in a healthcare setting. So they don't have the over 65. Well, maybe they changed it because of the number of calls they got. So my phone call was on Tuesday, I believe. And so today's Thursday. So maybe they changed it because they got so many phone calls. So Dr. Hill was on the conference, as well as Dr. Lisa Merritt. And they were talking about how, we really need to limit it to the people that are vulnerable, which was the over 65 and those who have, symptoms, but maybe they have looks like they have further changed it to just people with symptoms. But, if it's an indication that they got a lot of phone calls, then I think that's important information that they got to say, we need to expand this pop-up testing. We need to get more tests. Everybody wants more tests. And I do have to say that I was in on a phone call from the White House yesterday, and then I was in on a conference. So it was myself, it was through the White House, it was the White House's department that did the conference call. It was just me and about 700 people across the country talking about the Abbott tests. And that's the big buzzword now about who's getting those quick Abbott tests. And they are getting them, they're procuring them, they're trying to get them, and they're trying to get them distributed. Obviously, they're trying to get them to the hot spots in the country. And then they distribute them through the channels, which is to the state. Then the state goes down to the county. And so, whether we get them and we don't get them is a different story. I was asking our health department about them, Chuck Henry, about those. 3 weeks ago when I had heard about the Abbott tests. So I know it's on the radar. Whether we get them, I don't know. But as soon as we can increase our capacity, they will, I'm sure, start increasing their capacity. And believe it or not, and I'm sure you all probably know this, it's actually, there are several parts to the testing, and the swabs are a piece of it, and those are in short supply. So there's discussion of, can you just use a Q-tip instead of a special swab? And these are all the things that none of us were prepared for, or prepared to answer, or prepared to deal with when this started. And that's one of my hopes, is that when we're over the curve and we're out of this, that we have protocols in place and supplies in place so that we know what to do next time this happens.
Mayor, before I go to Bob, he had a question. The Abbott test is the positive or negative for a current infection?
Yes, that is not antibodies. Yeah.
How about the antibody test? Are we getting any of those?
Well, I do believe we do have the antibody testing, because there was the article in the paper 2 days ago about Dr. Fanazio, who donated her plasma, I believe. And she tested positive, and then she tested negative. So I do believe we have it. It's probably limited, those kinds of tests. But
are we trying to get those in the city? I guess that's the holy grail that we're.
Yeah.
And we're not able to get them. They're not available yet.
Well, the thing is these kinds of, like the Abbott tests are produced. I was in on a phone call with the U.S. Congress of Mayors I guess it's about a month ago. And I was talking to the mayor of Detroit, who said, and I've been in communication with them, who said they had the Abbott tests, and they were using those quick tests, which the test comes back in under 15 minutes, for the first responders. And that's how they were using their testing. And I know they're trying to produce as many of these tests as they can, but again, we're a big country, lots of people, so it has to filter through the proper channels. All of that stuff has to filter through the proper channels. So I'm hoping.
Sorry.
Yeah, I only have a couple of comments. One is that the pop-up exam was also on Nextdoor, but there's a company out on Ringling called Passport Health, and they have a wait list, and they will check you for antibodies. They had 100 tests last week, and of course they went out very quickly. But I also believe that they can check you for if you actually have COVID-19. They charge a small fee for that, but it's in Courthouse Square on Ringling, and it's called Passport Health.
Passport. Thank you.
Passport Health.
Thanks very
I
much.
didn't know about that. Thank you. Just have to grab something really quickly. I have to grab my pen.
Does anyone else have any questions for the mayor before we let her go?
Sorry.
All right, Mayor, was there any parting comments you'd like to make before we just thank you for being here and spending so much time?
Thank you. I just wanted to say, to remind everyone about the social distancing, wear your masks, don't gather in groups, of course. Fill out the survey that we sent, please, thank you, and help all the businesses as much as you can.
Thank you, and please thank the city staff for all their efforts in
I will.
doing this. We really appreciate it.
And can you just make sure you get a hold of Diane and put this on my schedule so that I have it on here, and then I'm happy to participate anytime.
Oh, that would be terrific. Yes,
Yeah.
We'll discuss that. We're going to talk about it as a board now, and we'll get back to you. And we appreciate.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And have a great afternoon.
Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you.